everybody, thank you so much for joining me this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're located. I'm really excited today to talk to you about challenges in enriching animal environments in a contract research organization. I'm Michelle Weideman. I'm a veterinarian here at MPI in extremely snowy Michigan today. So yeah, let's just jump right in. Oh, I wanted to remind you, if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to shoot them in electronically and we will address those at the end. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, first we're going to start with just a general overview of a contract research organization, in case some of you guys don't really know what that's all about. Then we're going to address several challenges that occur, some of which are special to contract research, some of which we're all familiar with, and how that impacts environmental enrichment for animals. And then we're going to finish up with how we can all stay in the lead in this very important topic. So what is a contract research organization, which is what CRO stands for. It's a very common abbreviation. If you'll forgive me, I'm going to read it straight from Dr. Wikipedia. So according to Wikipedia, CRO is an organization that provides support to the pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and medical device industries in the form of research services outsourced on a contract basis. What that basically boils down to is we try to offer our clients our expertise in moving their drug or device from conception into FDA marketing approval. And that does create several challenges for us on the animal enrichment end. We're a service-oriented, budget-conscious business, primarily a business, with a large animal population. And we have to continuously balance both the requirements of the FDA as we run studies with the regulatory agencies, the USDA and ALAC. So our first challenge we're going to talk about related to that list is being service-oriented. And really, anybody who's worked in any sort of service industry understands what it means to be service-oriented for your client. And we definitely have to pay attention to that as a CRO. Sometimes that results in us doing some crazy new things, especially in the area of new species. You know, contract research organizations work a lot with a variety of species, but there's always something extra that we haven't ever dealt with before that may come up. And when that happens, you have to worry about having a brief lead time for preparations, because once you said yes, you got to be ready to move forward with it. So you have to research that new species, come up with what they might like for enrichment, and get it in-house by the time they're here. But at the same time you're dealing with that, you're also trying to set up enclosures for the animals, get the right feed on site, make sure your staff is trained with handling and all the techniques they're going to have to do. That takes a lot of time. And then you have to update all of your SOPs to make sure your facility is ready for the new species. So an example that I can give you from personal experiences with cows. MPI had never worked with cows before. We had a couple of cow studies in over the last couple of years, and it's been very interesting to fit them into our community here. But it was great. It actually went really well. The enclosure setup was super easy. We had a couple of technicians who had worked with dairy farms before and were able to help out with the handling part. But the enrichment part was pretty interesting to try to deal with the cows. If you're getting a new species in that you've maybe never worked with, but it's common in lab animal, there's a lot of literature and commercial industries out there that will provide you with enrichment ideas and enrichment products. But cows are a little less common. There isn't a lot out there that says, this is cow enrichment, let's do it. So we tried to come up with something on our own that would be that would work well for the cows. As you can see in the picture there, one of our attempts was a Challenger ball stuffed with hay. I will say that the cows were not overly impressed with this particular enrichment device. We got the picture, I will confess, by smearing a little Nutrical on the Challenger ball. So the cow was interested for the couple seconds we took the picture. But still, we tried, and you have to try. And it certainly looks really cool. So another problem we have to worry about in contract research is being budget conscious. And this is something that everybody has to worry about, I totally understand. But in CROs, we're very competitive. We have to be able to offer our clients a really good deal to get their business here while offering a really high quality product. And that's the balance, is budget, high quality. How do you make that work? Some opportunities we have come with developing our own enrichment, but that can actually be pretty expensive too, depending on what you decide to do. You have to build it, design it, try it out, and potentially just throw it away when it doesn't work out. One way to try novel enrichment that's a little bit lower expense is the concept of recycled enrichment. So in the picture here, you can see on top the two bunnies eating hay out of a Kleenex box. The Kleenex box was free. You already paid for the Kleenex. Use the Kleenex. The box was just going to get thrown away or recycled. Why not use it for enrichment? And the rabbits love it. They get to eat the hay out of it and then rip up the box later. But unfortunately, the downside of recycled enrichment is it doesn't look very good. Clients walking through may look in their bunny cages and say, why is there a cardboard box in there that's clearly been somewhere else? It raises questions about contaminants. So there's bonuses, but there's also some big subtractions from using recycled enrichment. So for this particular case, what we ended up going with, if you can see in the lower picture, is we used the whisk technique, which is, I've seen on several posters, a lot of people are doing this, and it's really nice. They're stainless steel whisks, they're very inexpensive. Stuff them with hay, so they serve kind of the same purpose as the Kleenex box, but can go through cage wash. And the rabbits really like these too. The really nice thing about them is being able to hang them up a little higher to get the rabbits to exercise a little more, reach up for the hay. It's worked out really well. Sometimes you can get enrichment that meets both needs, you know, the reasonable price and ends up being a huge benefit for the animal. And sometimes you didn't even know that what you're buying is going to end up being enrichment. For an example of that, in the picture here, you can see our standard primate caging. This is the caging that allows for pair housing. There's pair house doors on the top and pair house doors on the bottom that allow the monkeys to be socially housed. But a lot of times when you're trying to socially house primates, pair housing isn't enough. You know, really the more primates you can get socially housed together, the better for the animal. So rather than trying to buy a whole new caging line that will allow for group housing, we decided to go for these tunnels that you can see in the picture. There's a tunnel attaching the top bank to the bottom bank of cages. So this allows all four of these monkeys, and you can see in the picture, to be socially housed together. Right now they're separate because they're being target trained, but they all have access to each other, the top and the bottom. What ended up being the enrichment bonus for this, apart from the social housing flexibility it gave us, is the tunnel itself turned out to be really nice enrichment. It gave the monkeys a lot of vertical space, so they can interact with each other socially from that vertical aspect. It really helps with establishing hierarchies. It allows you to hang enrichment in that tunnel. It gives them an extra way to manipulate that from the top to the bottom of the tunnel. Another benefit that we weren't expecting, you have a lot of sexually mature males in house, and some of those can be very hard to socially house. They end up without a social partner. And they don't always do well with that, even if they're the ones causing the problems with their social partner, right? We had one male monkey, I remember, who seemed to be doing fine and then suddenly started showing us decline. We tried x-rays and we did blood work and we could not figure out what was wrong with this monkey. And we ended up putting a tunnel on his cage. So instead of the side-to-side access to give him his full cage size needs, we attached the tunnel and gave him a top and bottom. And it was like night and day with this monkey. He turned around overnight, was very bright, very personable again. Just being able to have that vertical space to be able to come out in the room, like porch style, but move around and interact with the other monkeys in the room visually in that vertical space was huge for that animal. So that ended up being a really great investment. Another smaller example of the win-win is the recycled enrichment you can see at the bottom, that picture there. That's the paper tube, so it's disposable, but it's rolled in marshmallow and covered with delicious things, fruity bites in this picture. So this is an example of recycled enrichment that looks really great. Sponsors love seeing it. The monkeys obviously love interacting with it, and they get the benefits of the recycled enrichment. They get to rip it up when they're done. So those are two examples of some win-win enrichment for you that is cost-effective and really cool. Here's some pictures of some of our other cost-effective enrichment that some of the animals have enjoyed. There's a monkey enjoying the paper tube I showed you earlier. They really like that. The next picture, the wire coil, is stainless steel coil that is stuffed with treats and then the rope around it. That's a really neat one because it's very simple. The stainless steel coil is basically the undisposable part, but they can interact with the treats. They love pulling apart the rope. That's a really fun toy. And as you can see here, it's hung out into the tunnel to allow more monkeys access to the toy. One of my favorite pictures is a little guy in the corner sharing with his partner the block of wood. I really like that one. Sharing enrichment is really cool when you get to see that happen. Below that is the bubble machine that a lot of people get to use. It's just a one-time investment of the bubble machine, and then the bubbles themselves are pretty inexpensive, and that's a fun time for the monkeys. And the one below that is just a stainless steel rod through an apple. I mean, how much simpler can you get than that? And then the monkey is entertained by eating an apple off the rod. Then there's a couple of cotton gin pictures for you. This is all disposable enrichment, but the cotton gins just love it. The middle picture there is a glove or a booty box that's been smeared with peanut butter in the bottom. So they look up the peanut butter and then destroy the box. Cotton gins love destroying boxes. Marshmallow fluff container. If you're finished emptying out the marshmallow fluff for the monkeys, don't rinse out the container. Give it to a cotton gin. They love that. Lick it off. Carry it around. They have a great time. So another challenge we face is large animal populations. In a CRO, we run a lot of gen tox studies which require a large number of animals per study. So we just have a big population of animals in general. And that can obviously cause difficulties in a couple of ways. It's expensive because you have to have enough enrichment to provide for an entire population. And also you have to be able to easily pick out animals that require additional attention from the big group and be able to provide that for them. So your enrichment program can get pretty complicated when you have a large number of animals. It's very challenging. You want to make sure that you're meeting the regulations for the whole population, but you have to be able to provide that additional enrichment as well. So training consistency is huge. Training all of your technicians to make the same judgment call on an animal that they see that may need additional attention, and if they're not sure, to ask the question anyway. We spend a lot of time training people on that aspect. But your program, while it has to be complicated enough to meet all of those needs, to meet the needs of the large population and the individual animal, it has to be easy to understand for the employees performing it and for the sponsors and regulators auditing it. You want to be able to show off your program. You want them to understand what's happening and think it's cool with you. So my example for that is my slide here has a picture of one of our super complicated forms. So this is a form that we use for the additional enrichment aspect of the program to record what we're giving each animal. And as you can see, I mean, you can't even see what it says. The writing is so tiny to fit everything on there. So you really want to keep an eye. Your enrichment coordinator may think that this is a really great form and use it really effectively, but you want to make sure that everybody who looks at that form understands what it says and what they're trying to get out of it. Okay, so the most fun we have in a CRO is dealing with the GLPs. The FDA regulations that govern how to run a preclinical study are called GLPs. We focus a lot on them in the contract research organization, and it can make enrichment kind of fuzzy to perform. So we train our employees over and over again on animal welfare, and it seems like that should be straightforward. You train them once, everybody's on the same page, and you're good to go. But when the GLPs are involved, life gets fuzzy in that aspect. So as I said, GLPs are good laboratory practices. They're FDA guidelines that tell us how to run a preclinical study. They focus on data collection, data retention, and having a healthy animal model to start. So what about continuing welfare of the animal throughout the study? That's what we're focused on when we're providing enrichment, right, is long-term care. Well, I'll read a section of GLPs to you. Animals may be treated for disease or signs of disease, provided that such treatment doesn't interfere with the study. May provide treatment. So with that kind of attitude about basic medical care of an animal on a study, what must the GLPs say about enrichment? And the answer is nothing. They don't say anything about enrichment. And really, when you think about why the GLPs exist, that's not a big surprise. The GLPs are focused on data collection and having valid data. They're not really focused on the welfare of the animal, which is what we're focused on. So in a way, that's good because the GLPs don't restrict you. You can create the snazziest program that you can think of, and in a GLP facility it'll still fly because the GLPs don't tell you you can't do it. But on the other hand, there's an overriding atmosphere in a GLP facility that creates caution in this area. A lot of principal investigators have had negative experiences with the FDA, submitting a study and having them come back with a question about variability that even they didn't anticipate. And enrichment is a way to introduce variability into a study. So they can be very, depending on their history with the FDA, they can be very cautious about the enrichment program that they allow you to have. So with that atmosphere, how do you have a successful program? Because we still have to have a successful program. So there are a few things that the GLPs offer that can help you have a successful program under an FDA-governed study. So the GLPs do tell you that you have to have SOPs. SOPs on animal care specifically. And the regulators, the USDA and ALAC, tell you that you have to have an animal enrichment program. So per that, the GLPs require you have an SOP that describes your enrichment program. So that standing operating procedure can give the primary investigator of that study some comfort. It gives them a recipe for the enrichment program that you're going to provide on their study. And that's what they want. They want to know what's happening. They want to be able to summarize it for the FDA and describe what potential impact, if any, it might have on their study. So your SOPs are very important in this case in fully describing your program. Plus it gives you a really easy, great way to show regulators what your program is and how great it is. But you want to be careful when you're writing those SOPs because you can almost trap yourself in a corner by being too specific. You have to be specific. Per the GLPs, it has to be a procedure that you can follow to be a standard operating procedure, SOP. But you don't want to trap yourself with the enrichment that you can offer. And my example is in the pictures here on the slide. You have a couple of mice in the top picture with a paper tube and some paper crinkle material for nesting. And then the bottom is a product provided by commercial industry that is a paper box filled with the same crinkle paper so that you throw it in the cage and the mouse gets to deconstruct the entire thing to build its nest. So when you ask yourself, is this the same enrichment, the top picture and the bottom picture? The question actually does not have a very straightforward answer. It's a pretty complicated answer. It depends on your SOP. If your SOP allows crinkled nesting material and a paper tube, then that product on the bottom is not permitted on a GLP study. So you want to make sure that your SOP allows for new enrichment that you find that you want to integrate into your program to be done easily and still be within GLPs, because it's important to keep your program moving forward. A good enrichment program needs to be able to change with the times and change with what's available as a product. Other GLP guidelines that you need to take into consideration when you're doing enrichment are contaminants, big focus on contaminants. So I'm going to read another section for you. Ensure feed and water contaminants that are reasonably expected to be present are not at levels above those specified in the protocol. And then also remember the previous statement about providing that treatment does not interfere with your study. There's another set of GLP guidelines. This is the OECD guidelines, which is a chemical testing sort of guideline. Any material that comes in contact with the test system must be free of contaminants at a level that would interfere with that test system. So basically, you take those things together, and your enrichment has to be reasonably free of contaminants and not interfere with the test system. Those are your two things. And you're like, that is pretty vague, actually, but it's something you have to address in order to have a good enrichment program in a GLP facility. Oh, actually, let me talk about these pictures for a second. So the picture on the top there is a good example of something that we in the enrichment industry would look at and say, this is clearly reasonably free of contaminants. The wood block is from a commercial vendor. The paint roller's never been used. But a scientist who's extremely concerned about potential outside contaminants may disagree with you. They may look at that and be able to list a whole number of contaminants that could be present. So you want to have good criteria for proving that your enrichment items are reasonably free of contaminants per the GLPs. More specific example for NPI is the rope toy on the bottom. We just recently got into giving our monkeys rope toys, which is a pretty fantastic piece of enrichment, by the way. But we initially ordered some really big industrial size rope because we thought bigger ropes would last longer and be more fun for the monkeys. So we got this giant box in of the big industrial-sized rope and opened up the box. We're all excited because our new enrichment is here, and this waft of gas odor came out of the box. And we're like, oh man, there's no way we're going to be able to say that this is reasonably free of contaminants. So we ended up going with a different rope that's much more guaranteed to be free of that sort of thing, much more used in animal industries, and the monkeys still love it. It still worked out great. So when you're worrying about your enrichment program and trying to set up a good program, it's important to remember that what the GLPs don't say can sometimes speak volumes. When you're introducing enrichment into a study design, you're going to introduce some level of variability. It's unavoidable. A certificate of analysis is only going to get you so far in convincing the scientist whose job it is to make sure that that study is valid, to assure them that no variability or contaminants are going to be introduced. It's extremely difficult, especially with a really tight study. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that they're under a lot of pressure to make sure that this study goes well, and you can work with them to help create enrichment that it's good for the animals and good for them. I have some examples of that. One thing you can do to help out is to try to get creative. If your scientist or investigator has a specific need, a specific thing that they're trying to avoid as far as contaminants or variability, find out what that is, because you can help them find something that'll help. For example, we had a DART study that could not be anything potentially edible for enrichment in the cage. So I'm not just talking about edible enrichment, but a plastic tunnel that the rat could chew on, or nylobone that they could ingest small pieces of. They didn't want anything in there that could end up inside the animal. So that only left stainless steel enrichment, which for rats is pretty tricky. You don't want to just give them a toy. There's a lot of controversy about the stainless rattles and whether or not they actually enjoy that, or if that's a stressor. We try to stay away from those. But there are stainless shelters out there that are commercially available that rats can use, but they're expensive. Again, we're back to being budget conscious, right? We didn't want to buy a whole new set of enrichment just for this one study when it was only going to be used that one time. So I had a very creative supervisor in our equipment group walk through all of the equipment storage areas, and they found this insert in the top picture you can see there. It went with some old style wire bottom cages. I'm not even sure how it works or what it was for. It had been in storage for so long and no one had ever used it, and we had a couple hundred of them. So he just took it back to his office and bent it over, and you can see in the bottom picture there's a nice couple of different designs of stainless arch made from our totally free inserts that were not being used in the storage room. And the study director loved it, and the rats used them quite well, and it worked out really well. The other thing you can do to try to manage this is to prove your point. Run a small in-house study. And this is obviously harder than the getting creative example I gave. But it's got bonuses. Some of the not good things about it is it does cost money, labor time to make it happen, potentially animal usage, although hopefully not. Hopefully you can get away without using extra animals to prove an enrichment item. But it does take time and effort. And data collection at the end, and potentially statistical analysis. But the good part is that technicians can really get involved in that aspect of it, especially if it's for animals that they're going to be dealing with later. If they're helping to develop enrichment, it gives them ownership of the process, and potentially posters and presentations like this where they can share their ideas and get really excited about it. And investigators really like it because it gives them data collected on their site with animals that they traditionally use, that they can show the FDA and show sponsors to prove that what we're doing is okay. It's not going to cause variability that will disrupt the study. One study that we ran at NPI is this ice cube enrichment study. I won't go into it too much for time's sake, but it's just trying to show that the addition of chicken broth into the ice cube was not going to cause any additional variability than a regular ice cube that wasn't superseded by the joy of the animals when they got to eat the ice cube. Remember, investigators love their animals too. They want them to be happy and have great enrichment. So this was just a study to prove that the variability was minimum and the enjoyment of the dogs was maximum when they added a little bit of chicken broth. One of the biggest struggles in GLP facilities recently is social housing. This is the biggest push, in my opinion, that I've seen with USDA and ALAC inspectors recently, again, in the last couple of years. And that's difficult to accomplish sometimes in a GLP facility, social housing. So this is our current struggle. You know, this is the classic struggle. Anybody who does GLP studies is familiar with the USDA, the FDA, the classic struggle in animal care. And I think this is the current classic struggle, is social housing. So per the regulations, per the new guide, everything has to be socially housed unless specifically exempted for medical reasons or a really good scientific reason that's approved by your IACUC. So the medical reasons are pretty straightforward. I think we can all imagine what those might be to individually house a monkey, but the scientific reasons can get a little fuzzy, especially as we're just starting to push this forward with scientists who maybe aren't used to having to provide such a robust justification for individual housing. Some straightforward examples of why individual housing might be okay on a study or dermal studies. You don't want the social housed animals to rub the test article all over and all over themselves, and so dermal studies, individual housing. And then jacketed or implanted animals can sometimes, depending on what the implant is, be difficult to socially house. But the classic one that we deal with is food consumption. Food consumption is an endpoint that's typically required in many gen-tox study designs and a lot of DART study designs, reproductive study designs. It's a very classic endpoint that's been used a lot over time. The reason for food consumption is because it can help you detect mild toxicity early on in the study, early on in the process. So the first thing an animal does obviously when it doesn't feel well is stop eating. So it is a valid endpoint, but it's tricky to work out that endpoint and have an animal be socially housed. In a large rodent study, there's statistical analysis you can do to allow pair housing and food consumption. But in the larger animal studies, dogs and monkeys, for example, it's more difficult when you have smaller numbers of animals on study. So how to work out social housing in the face of food consumption is our current struggle. The advice I can give you, sometimes just raising awareness to the investigator that, hey, you know, I know you want food consumption here, but social housing is mandated unless you have a good reason, and this is why maybe I don't think food consumption is going to be as necessary in this study as it would be in a different study design. A lot of times that helps, so them just talking it out with you and realizing how important it is to regulators can get it done. Another method that we've had really good success with lately on the dog side is encouraging limited feeding. You offer ad-lib food for a certain period of time during the day, 4 to 6 hours, this is kind of what we do, and then allow the dogs to be socially housed for the whole rest of the day and night. It's been very successful, actually. It's worked out really well, and it's really helped increase our social housing statistics while keeping our investigators happy with the data that they're getting. Making sure I didn't miss anything, sorry. Okay, so another comment on social housing that can be difficult in a GLP environment is how do you, and this is more in the monkey areas, how do you keep your stable pairs that you've worked so hard to develop together in a GLP study? There's a lot of pre-test testing that's done in GLP studies to make sure that all the animals are healthy before they start. In a particularly tricky study or a study that's looking for something very specific, you can actually weed out a lot of animals pre-test that are excluded from study and not allowed to go on study. And in a monkey study where you've spent months carefully pairing your monkeys to make sure that everyone's compatible, rearranging your monkeys before a study start just to get them into dose groups can be very disruptive to the monkeys. It doesn't go well, it causes a lot of stress. So how do you keep those stable pairs that you've worked so hard at together? And one thing we've tried successfully is to keep the extra monkeys in the same room as their buddies as buddy monkeys. So they don't go on study, but they are kept as a social pair. That's their whole point of being in the room, is to be that monkey that is on study, to be his social pair. And that's worked very well. And we've actually been able to extrapolate that into some other areas of study. For example, if you have a study that has a very small number of animals on it, some are even like one male and one female and that's it. How do you socially house those two animals when there's no one else on the study? And so using this buddy animal concept, we've been able to extrapolate it not just to stable pairs, but to odd or small numbers of animals on study. Remember that social housing is an expectation of the USDA, regardless of species compatibility. This can cause a problem because, as we all know, some species are not as social as others. Male mice is a great example. The mature male monkeys we talked about are difficult to pair. So what do you do in a facility where you're trying really hard to meet these social housing requirements, but that is a problem? You really have to make some tough calls. Questions about institutional exemptions, which I can tell you from experience the regulatory agencies aren't a huge fan of. But you have to make the call. You have to make the call for the safety of the animals. And if that means singly housing those male mice and just throwing a lot of enrichment in the cages with them, then that's what you're doing, and you have literature to support it, and you have to stand by it. It's really tough on our end because we want to socially house everything, right? We want everyone to be together. But make sure you're making logical decisions, and if you do decide to socially house, don't forget that extra enrichment. It's really important. So with all these challenges and all this complication and effort that we put in daily to trying to make sure our animals are well enriched and well cared for, how do we stay in the lead? And what we have to remember is that we have to keep trying. That's really the best way, is just keep trying. I know you guys out there who are enrichment coordinators in your facility and are trying really hard to bring new and exciting things in and are maybe hitting some walls. You have to keep trying. Don't give up. We have a responsibility in our welfare roles to remind the people that we work with what the new regulatory issues are, what the current pushes are, what's important to the regulators, and why. And then go above and beyond that. What's happening in the industry, what's happening in other countries, what's happening overseas. So you have to stay in the lead, and your business will thank you for it in the end, but it's going to be rough. But you can do it. Your businesses will thank you. Helping your scientists understand that improving the welfare of the animals improves their model. And the one time that you save a mouse study with nesting material, and you will have converted a scientist for life. And you can show this to them. You can show them the improved welfare of animal with enrichment and social housing will make their studies better. The happy cows come from California slogan. It's one of my favorites. I'm trying to institute happy research, animals make valid studies here. It's not going over very well, but I'm trying. So even the FDA, I have found, has started to push research institutions about animal welfare. Now, this hasn't happened a lot, and the couple of people I've told this to have kind of given me funny looks, but we have experienced it here. The FDA has started asking questions about animal care and welfare, so I do think they're coming around, and I'm hopeful that GLPs and other regulations will coalesce in the near future. And remember that European studies routinely do this stuff. This is not crazy for them. The group house, you can see the picture there, the group house dogs. I've seen more and more pictures of dogs outside on study breaks. This stuff is happening, and we can do it too. If they can do it and run valid studies, so can we. So the age of enforcement that's going on with the USDA has been painful for a lot of us. Even us in welfare roles, I think, have found this age of enforcement a little painful, but it's good because it helps the scientific staff understand the importance of what we're doing every day, the importance of animal welfare and animal enrichment. Everyone knows that food, water, and caging are like the bare necessities of animals, right? Well, enrichment is a bare necessity too. It really is. And the more we can advertise that, the more we can raise awareness about that, the better that this will get. We have to work that into people's training, into people's minds, that it's food, water, caging, and enrichment. Enrichment is not an extra. It's a normal process that we have to do. Otherwise, the Pirates Code is going to come up and get us. He who falls behind is left behind. And we cannot be left behind in this business, right? So that's it. That's the talk. I wanted to thank all my fellow veterinarians at MPI who work so hard with me every day to make animal welfare a reality. And Harriet and Phil on the list there are two enrichment experts. Hopefully some of you guys have heard the names and seen them on posters. They are amazing at their jobs. Rob Chandonnet is the supervisor who came up with the stainless arch, so I like to give him a shout out. And Mr. Steve Dursick is my GLP guru here at MPI. So those are all my thank yous. So now I'll do some Q&A. And let you guys consider this picture, which I think is amazing squirrel monkey enrichment. I'm not sure how happy the capybara is about it, but the squirrel monkeys are clearly having an amazing time. So that's my recommendation for squirrel monkey enrichment. Get yourself a capybara. Okay, so let's see what we have here for questions. How do you disinfect, decontaminate your recycled cardboard enrichment? So you can, it's difficult. You can spray this down with alcohol spray. It makes you feel good. It doesn't really do anything. That's the main reason why we don't use this on GLP studies anymore. We do use it for our stock animals, so the animals that are just hanging around on washout or haven't gone on to study yet, they can get the recycled stuff. Or animals that have more specific problems, like monkeys with behavioral issues. The study directors will generally approve the recycled enrichment because it's important to get the monkey healthy, and they're less concerned about contaminants on an individual basis, more on a study-wide basis. But yeah, it's really difficult. It's it's not the easiest thing. Another question, have you had issues with your pig ingesting cardboard from the boxes? No, actually we haven't. They really seem to like the destruction phase. Even when there's food inside there, if they have ingested, it's nothing that we've been able to find later or certainly cause them any problems. But they do love the destruction phase of cardboard boxes. Do you have information about possible differential effects associated to volume of bedding? Oh, hang on, this one's longer. Let me click. I asked because some experiments include the reduction in the volume of bedding in order to be able to make video recordings. I do not have any of that information. I'm sorry, I haven't done any research on bedding volume here. Sorry, I don't have anything for that. Behavioral. Oh, here we go. Behavioral study, I think, would not be affected over time by variation in EE program question. I would say that, yeah, behavioral studies definitely have more specific enrichment needs, but the animals still get enrichment. It's just much more standardized, and the study director generally is very involved with picking out what that enrichment is. But those animals still do get an enrichment of some kind. But you're right, it has to not interfere with the behavioral study. It's very important. Is there a concern about ink printed on the tissue or other boxes? Yeah, that's another good contaminant question, which is another reason why we do not generally do this on GLP studies. So that's exactly the kinds of questions that we get. But again, in stock colony animal that's not currently on study, that sort of thing isn't generally a problem. But yes, that's another good reason, the ink quality and content, why they're not used on GLP studies anymore. I have an investigator that is conducting feed studies with mice and states the mouse house alters the behavior of the mice. Nestlets is okay. The mice are singly housed for 28 to 35 days. Any recommendations? I find that the mice don't really enjoy the nestlets a whole lot. And as far as the behavioral alterations, I'm not really sure what nesting material would do that, or wouldn't do, that a house would. That's a really interesting one. But I found that mice that are singly housed, if they can have nesting material, are pretty happy. Obviously, they like both. The house and the nesting material together is the best combo. But if they won't allow houses and you can't convince them otherwise, as long as they get really good nesting material, I think your mice will be fine. I would say if you can talk them into the crinkle paper bedding, that would be much better than the nestlets. The crinkle paper bedding, they can spend a lot more time building. It ends up in a much more robust nest. And it's actually really, it may look hard to administer the nestlets and then clean it up. Because it's paper, it's actually really not that bad. Our cage wash and employees really like the paper nesting over the nestlets, surprisingly. But they really do. So I would really recommend that. I would try to get them to approve the crinkle paper bedding for nesting material for your mice. Okay. Do I apply enrichment by invertebrates? Unfortunately, we don't have any invertebrates in MPI. That's another new one. You never know. The day may come. But I actually don't have a lot of expertise in enrichment for invertebrates because we don't have any here. But good question. Okay. Oh, someone's saying that there's a paper by Trevor Poole called Happy Animals Make Good Science, that happy animals via enrichment will benefit your studies. So there you go. There's a great paper. It's a 1997 Lab Animal, issue 31. Poole is Trevor's last name. So there you go. There's a good paper to support what we're saying here. What enrichment do you suggest for my singly housed and wire mesh cages? Really good question. Okay, so this is the study I mentioned kind of super briefly. Save a mouse study with nesting material and you'll have a fan in your study director for life for enrichment. That was a study. It was a wire bottom caging study, and the mice were suddenly going downhill. They weren't even being dosed. No one could figure out what was going on, but they were in wire bottom cages, singly housed. So I went through on a weekend, of course, stuff always happens on a weekend, right? So I went through on the weekend and put nesting material in all their cages, the crinkle paper again. Within 2 days, all those mice were active and happy and healthy. So, and it worked really well as far as, if you have cage wash concerns or such. It actually, the paper material does not get too caught up in the wire mesh bottom. And if you give them a good enough amount of nest, I think 8 grams is the recommended amount, which is actually a pretty decent amount. If you give them at least that 8 grams, they build enough of a nest underneath that it doesn't all fall through or anything on the wire bottom. So I'm really, if you can't tell, I'm really a huge fan of the paper nesting material. And it looks like that is the end of our questions. So that does it. Close that. And I just wanted to say again, thank everybody so much for attending this presentation. I hope everybody had a great time and learned a lot. And again, my name is Michelle Weideman from MPI. If you come up with any questions, feel free to contact me later. But anyway, I hope everybody has a fantastic day. And if you're here in the Midwest with me in the snowbank, stay dry and stay warm. Thanks so much, you guys.